Need a hobby? Widen your skill set by doing what you love. Glad to be back at CodeStock. This is my 4th year here. I always enjoy it. It's a blast. It's good to reconnect with some old friends, make some new ones. I just think the conference is a great way to connect people and learn a whole lot and have fun the whole time. This is my first year speaking here. I'm extremely excited to be helping out with the presentations this year. It's just been a great experience being able to kind of really dive a little bit more into a topic to be able to present about it. They say that the best way to learn something more is to teach it. This is going to be a little bit of a weird thing that I've been learning more about because it's more of a soft skill kind of thing, so we'll get into that. CodeStock talks, I've noticed, just from this year and previous years, are on a kind of spectrum. At one end, you've got the really niche, really specific talks where we're talking about here's how you can use Node.js on your 3D printed Raspberry Pi to talk to your Heroku server through Salesforce. You know, if you're using all those technologies, it's a great talk. It's exactly what you need. And if not, then you may get that one passed. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got these talks that are so vague and general that they apply to anything. Programming, good. That's about it. Like, oh yeah, programming is good. I like that. This talk is going to be more on the vague side, which is kind of weird for me because I'm usually excited about the really niche specific stuff, this particular technology in this language. So talking about vague, soft skill kind of things is a little unfamiliar for me. But I think it's important stuff that I think everyone's going to be able to get something out of it, hopefully. Because these things are not going to be specific to programming even in some spots. I'm going to give you some practical applications for how this works with programming. But I think this could apply to just about anything that you want to improve on. So when I was approached to give a talk, I tried to figure out what my specialization is. Because I had these practical, specific technology kind of talks in mind when someone said, hey, you should give a programming talk. And I started looking through all my side projects, all the technologies that I've worked with over the past few years, and realized that I never really got really deep into any one technology. I looked at all these side projects that were half-finished, kind of half ideas, and realized, what I am really good at is abandoning side projects. And I think we can all relate to that. We can get about maybe 2 weeks into something that we're really excited about, and then we're never going to look at it again. I've got a folder full of new folder 1, new folder 2, code 2, project 2. And I have no idea what they are anymore, but I still think they were useful projects because I was able to kind of get a little bit of experience with something new, some new technology, new programming language, and just be able to apply that later. I think that's something that everyone should be able to learn how to do. So I think my specialization is being more of a generalist, jack of all trades. So I think every CodeStock talk, by contract, has to have the brief autobiography. So this is going to be the condensed version of that. If you didn't see it on the previous slide or hear me say it, I'm Eric Dobbs. I've been living in Tennessee my whole life, despite not really having much of a discernible southern drawl. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. Programming-wise, I've been programming professionally for about 5 years now. And I got started in programming, maybe some people can relate to this, from a device in high school, the TI-83 Plus graphing calculator. Maybe some of you guys are familiar with this. Anybody have this in class? Yeah, a handful. Button right there in the middle, program, lets you have access to kind of a very, it's a basic programming language that they've got on these, and there's a whole chapter devoted in the very thick, hefty instruction manual for these calculators just on how to use the programming function on this. And in high school, this was exciting because suddenly I could take an idea it had to be a very small, very simple idea, but I could make it work. I could make this computer do what I wanted, which I had never seen anything like that before. And I kind of really got involved in programming really stupid little games for this thing. I had sheets and sheets of paper of pseudocode and coordinates on the screen. I can remember exactly how many pixels by how many pixels this was, because you just had to know that for drawing onto the screen. So I got really invested in programming on this calculator, and then for college I decided, you know what, I'm going to go into architecture and make buildings. And that turned out to be a terrible idea, and then I turned around and went into computer science. That was slightly better of an idea. But by the time I got out of college, I felt like I didn't really have much of a practical handle on programming. I had a whole lot of ideas about theory and big O notation and sorting algorithms, but I thought to myself, I don't know how to actually make a program now. I don't know how to actually start from scratch and say, okay, here's a to-do app in Windows. And that was kind of a scary moment for me when I left college and realized I had no idea what I was doing. So for a few years I went into computer repair, but started programming more on the side than I did in college. I actually started making an effort to just practice, just actually get out there and program. And I got better at it. Eventually I got picked up by Pilot Flying J. I've been there for 5 years and I've enjoyed every minute of it. You wouldn't realize that selling fuel is actually a huge problem for programmers. Just about in any business application, there's so many weird little rules to keep in mind. But doing all those programming projects beforehand actually prepared me. They had nothing to do with actual business applications. They had nothing to do with how to make a real Windows app. But just doing programming projects made me a better programmer. And that's really just a long-winded way of me saying, if you practice something, you get better at it. That's going to be kind of the central idea to this whole talk. And it's not some grand revelation, it's not some secret knowledge. It's just, if you do things a lot, you get better at them. And I think that's just something that we're gonna take some time to delve a little bit deeper into that. So, when I was trying to interview at Pilot, I really talked a lot about music in my interview, because they always tell you in the college prep that you have to have something kind of that makes you special. You know, everybody there is a good programmer. You gotta have that certain something that makes you different. And I was like, I'm a musician. I know how to play instruments. I'm special. But then I actually got hired there, and I started talking to people, and everyone was a musician. Like, oh, the SQL guy over there, yeah, he plays bass on the weekends. That guy, he's a violinist. This guy plays 3 different types of guitar. And I realized that's really weird, because I don't think musical talent is something I see a lot just, you know, in my friend groups beforehand. And now, when I'm around all these programmers, everyone has a little bit of musical talent or practice for some reason. And I thought that was really bizarre. I've got programming as a major interest, math as a major interest, and music as a major interest. And math I understood. I thought to myself, oh, of course there's going to be lots of mathematicians. You know, we're looking at all these equations and numbers and symbols and all these parentheses, especially for the Lisp programmers. It's nothing but parentheses. But music, that's weird. Why are there so many musicians? And I think the idea I've come up with is that in all 3 of these systems, this is an established set of rules and notation for expressing an idea. That in programming, we've got some idea we want to express, some set of do this in these cases, do it this many times. That's a huge simplification, but in math, summation from I equals 1 up to infinity, sum up these terms. In music, play this, but do it again, but on the second time do this at the end instead. You've got these same sort of ideas of you're going to perform a set of actions, and that's the simplest way to express this sort of idea. So I think that being able to express ideas and understand ideas in these kinds of systems, that's a skill. And just like any skill, you can practice it and you can get better. Just like playing an instrument, I think the more you program, the better you get. Again, not a secret. But we really need to kind of keep that in mind. If you want to get better at programming, you have to keep doing it. So, practice is a lot of work. I mean, if you ever had to learn an instrument as a kid, you know that one of the most just terrible things is knowing that today I have piano practice. And I'm going to have to sit down for an hour when I could be watching cartoons, and I'm just going to have to play these same scales over and over. Well, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, my family got a piano, and my dad took it upon himself to teach his children how to play. He was kind of a skilled piano player himself. He's just amazing to me how well he can play, and he decided that's what my kids need. I'm going to teach them how to play piano. And so he taught us out of this book, Teaching Little Fingers to Play. This was published in 1936, and the songs are boring. Really, really dull. I mean, how many people actually did have to learn an instrument as a kid? A lot of you. That's my exact point. Musicians, programmers. These books, these practice books, they are not meant to entertain. They are dull songs that are just meant to introduce a quick little concept, show you how to do it, and then make you do it for an hour. And that's it. Those of you who did not have to learn an instrument growing up, you're thinking in your head, Mary Had a Little Lamb, Three Blind Mice. No. Those songs are like 2 or 3 steps up in entertainment value. These are 3 notes back and forth. Okay, now do that again for an hour. I'm a 7 or 8-year-old kid. I'm thinking, I don't want to do this. I want to go build with my Legos. I want to go beat Mario 3. I want to go practice riding my bike around the neighborhood. This is not the kind of thing that a 7 or 8-year-old is going to be interested in. Now, it's a great skill to be able to play piano, and I realized this as a kid, but I can't bring myself to do the work to get better. So, fast forward to college, 2005-ish. I still can barely play chopsticks, and I have to go really slow if I'm going to use 2 hands. Google Videos came out, and you guys may remember the brief time Google Videos was available. Very briefly had a competition with YouTube until Google just decided, never mind, we'll just buy them. And so there was a video I saw on Google Video around 2005 of a guy playing piano. He was playing it really well. But what caught my attention, and this is going to sound a little funny, is that he was playing the theme from Mario Brothers. And he was playing it really well. And for some reason, I had never realized you could play other songs on piano. It doesn't have to be the stupid little dinky songs. You can play whatever you want. It may take you a lot of practice, but yeah, go for it. And so as I watched him, I started looking up tutorial videos and downloading sheet music, and I started practicing. And I started practicing a lot. And I got a little bit better and a little bit better, and eventually I was able to play those songs. And there was no sudden change in my skill set from before I watched that and after I watched it. I didn't learn something that I didn't already have in my mind before. But suddenly it was about something I was interested in. Suddenly there was motivation. And I think that's kind of going to be the central, we're going to come back to the central idea here. If you have to learn something, make it about something you like, and you get the motivation for free. Motivation is really hard to come by, but if it's something you're already interested in, you don't have to work at it. You're just going to want to do it. So that's pretty much it. Practice. We're going to practice, and we're going to get better. the more times you do something, the better you get. If you think about how many times you've written a for loop, it just comes completely naturally. There's no thought to it. It just happens. If you think about how many times you've just instinctively mashed Control S after finishing a thought in writing something, it's just there. The more times you do it, the better you get. So we're going to talk about good learning projects, good hobby projects. What are they? How can we make them happen? And we're going to break this down into 3 segments, because that's something that you also have to do in these talks, because 3 is really easy to memorize. So we're going to learn something new, we're going to do something fun, and also we're going to go fast. Those are the 3 pieces to what I think is a good learning project. This isn't backed by any kind of psychology or degree of hobbyologist. This is just observation that this is what's worked for me, and I hope it works for you. I hope you can find something in these ideas, in this advice, that is actually going to work for you, something you can take and run with. So let's get started. First off, we want to try new things. So what do I mean by something new? I don't mean that you have to come up with a new idea. You don't have to come up with a new app that's never been seen before, or a new website that no one before has ever come up with. I just mean something that's new to you, something a little bit unfamiliar, a little bit uncomfortable, that you need to brush up on a little bit, or something you've never used before and you need to learn or want to learn. So this is like the vitamin, the multivitamin that we're going to want to swallow, and it's going to taste awful and it's going to take a lot of work to get it down, but it's going to make us better in the end. Okay, so some ideas for some new things that you can learn. And this is going to be very different for if you are a seasoned developer or just kind of getting started out. How many people have been developing for less than 5 years now? Okay, good. That looks like about half, which is perfect, because I do want this to apply to both kind of newer developers and people that have a lot more experience. So these are going to apply a little bit differently to those 2 groups, and I don't know why I chose 5 years. I guess because I've been professionally doing this for about 5 years, so I consider that the cutoff. So one thing you can learn, a new language. So if you are kind of in that, I'm going to say about 1 year developing, and you've just kind of gotten to the point where you kind of feel comfortable with programming. You kind of know how to write your loops and handle your program flow. I think a new language is one of the best things you can jump onto. Why? How many people had to learn a second language in like high school? All right, pretty good number. I learned French. I don't know why I chose French. My high school offered Spanish, French, and Latin. I think I just picked at random. But French worked out pretty well for me. I've never actually used it, but I think it was still useful. Now, in French class, the one thing that you were supposed to learn by the end of it is French. But the one thing I actually learned more than anything in French class was English. And that's going to sound a little bit funny, but you don't really realize how English works. You don't really realize kind of the structure of the language until you're learning a different one. You can't really see the differences and the similarities until you kind of get out of English and start learning something different. I could speak fine in high school. I was not eloquent, but I kind of understood the rules of grammar. But I didn't really understand what an infinitive was or how to conjugate properly. It was just a natural thing. This is how you talk. This is how you say this phrase. But once I learned French, I kind of understood this is what's happening in English. This is why this word is different when it's preceded by this pronoun instead of that pronoun, or first person, second person, third person, all that. It was things I knew how to do, but I didn't really understand why I had to do it that way. So learning a new language is a fantastic thing for young developers, because you're going to start to see why things are working the way they are. When you get outside of the comfort zone of the language that you've been learning this whole time, you start to see things for the concepts they are, rather than for the syntax. You can start to see how function calls are actually working versus just, oh, that's just how you do it. So, new language, perfect opportunity for something that you can learn. Also, frameworks or libraries, anything that plugs into a project that you're working on, using other people's code. So, an example for me was when I first started programming professionally, I got stuck on just to start with, just some JavaScript stuff. Except it was actually just some jQuery stuff. But it was also called JavaScript. And I didn't really understand the distinction. I had never seen JavaScript before, I'd never seen jQuery before. I didn't really understand where one ended and the next began. And I think that actually being able to break away from using one single framework that you're familiar with, again, helps you kind of see, why are we doing things this way? One of the hobby projects I worked on, pretty soon after I started learning JavaScript, I intentionally decided I was going to use JavaScript with no frameworks, no libraries. It was going to be completely vanilla JS. And I started to realize, oh, that's why we use jQuery. That's actually kind of difficult. That's not an easy problem to solve. Oh, people still use that browser? Okay, all right, I can kind of see why this is useful. jQuery solves a lot of the problems that JavaScript doesn't handle on its own, that you would normally have to write the solutions, know all this information. So when you branch out from using this one framework that you're familiar with, you start to see why the framework is in place, how it works, why it works. So again, that's another good new thing that you can tackle. Also, a new type of project. So what kind of thing am I talking about there? If all you've done so far is work on websites, and you are a master at building websites, I would suggest you take on a side project that is not a website. If all you're familiar with is doing CLIs in Python, branch out, make a GUI, make a library, make your own tool that other developers can use, build a game for people to play. It doesn't have to be good, none of this has to be great, just do something that's out of your wheelhouse. If you can go out and do something that is completely alien to you, whether it's a new language, a new framework, or a completely different type of project, you're going to find that you're going to get so much better at the stuff you're already good at. These kinds of skills transfer very well, but the best skill that you can have is just being able to approach new problems. So, we know that we want to kind of get some of this new stuff, but where are we going to find these new things to work on? We want to start thinking proactively. We want to start having an idea of what we want to work on. And you may already have in your head, as I've been talking, hopefully, you've got some ideas in mind right now of, oh yeah, actually I've been meaning to look into learning this new language I heard about. Or I hear a lot of people talking about this technology. I have no idea what it is. I don't know if it's a language or a platform or what, but it seems really popular right now. I would really like to get some experience on it. Good. Hold on to that idea. First thing that you're going to want to do is make a list. If you can just maintain a list of all the things that you want to learn, all the things that you think could be useful, even if you don't want to learn them, that's going to be your first step. Because when you get to the point where you're ready to start your next project, the last thing you want to do is be just completely paralyzed with indecision. To just be thinking, okay, I'm ready to get started, what am I going to do? Because then you're going to lose all your momentum. If you can keep a list maintained of all those things that you've got in mind that need to be addressed, those technologies you want to learn, you're going to have no problem getting started on your next side project. And as soon as you're done with that, getting started on your next project. And while you're working on that side project, adding to the list the things that you're hearing about while you're working on your side project. Because while you're doing your work, you want to keep an eye out. And one of the best places you can find some new things, weirdly enough, Stack Overflow. I'm sure while you're working on something, you look up, hey, how do I do this in Swift? And then in the sidebar, you see all these weird questions about things you've never heard of. I'm not talking about like the world building Stack Exchange or the sci-fi Stack Exchange, but in the other in the other exchange sites, you'll see all these questions about technologies. You know, how do I create a list in this language I've never heard of? What is that? I better research that. That might be cool. If you can just keep an eye out on these platforms that you're already using, if you're on the programming subreddit, that's a good place to see what people are talking about, to see kind of what kinds of technologies are getting popular, because as older developers, we have a tendency to kind of get really good at one thing, and then we're done. We've made it, we can lay back and rest on our laurels, comfortable in the fact that we're never going to have to learn anything ever again. That's a terrible mindset. We have to always be improving, or else we're just going to be completely washed away by these new developers that are able to learn all these new technologies, and I really don't want to have to learn Node.js, but I realize that it's getting really popular and I'm going to have to learn it at some point, so I may as well bite the bullet and get with it. CodeStock, also an excellent opportunity. All these different talks, just go through the list. The ones you didn't go to even. Just go through the list and take a look at the descriptions. See what kind of things are being talked about here. Because that's actually a great resource for just knowing what kind of technologies are out there that you may never have heard of. We do have a tendency to kind of get siloed up and only want to deal with our expertise. But if you can kind of look at other developers, see what they're working on, that's a great resource for seeing what's available to learn. Also, we need to keep talking. That is, talk to other developers. Have somebody that you kind of talk to about all the things you're working on, all the new stuff you've learned, and have them tell you about what they've been learning. Because just having that open line of communication really lets you get a lot of fresh ideas in and hear about things that you wouldn't hear about otherwise. So if you can keep all these channels open, then you should have a pretty sustainable list of new things that you could be learning about, new things you could be researching. Alright, so second, we've got something new, but our project, we don't really want to start it because we like doing things that we already like doing and we don't want to actually put the time forth to practice, so we're going to make it fun. So we've got our multivitamin, we've got our pill, now we're going to sugarcoat it. This is the spoonful of sugar that's going to help the medicine go down. So if you think back to me learning piano, I did not want to practice until it was about something that I really enjoyed. And I think that's a really important thing in side projects that a lot of people may miss, is that a lot of people will start side projects because they need to learn new technologies, but they don't really get the motivation aspect. You've really got to have something that makes you want to keep working on this project, at least until you've kind of gotten an idea of the concepts that you're trying to learn. So we're going to make it something fun. Does anybody recognize this this scene right here? Okay, this is from a comic about programming. On this infinite grid of ideal 1 ohm resistors, what's the equivalent resistance between the two marked nodes? And that's kind of a weird little physicsy math problem. The context of it is that this is a puzzle that is so interesting to mathematicians that they cannot do anything but work on this problem when they see it. Just seeing this completely shuts their brains down and diverts all resources to, well, I guess, what if you, maybe you could start, and then that's all they can think about, is working on this problem, because it's so interesting, it's so new, they've never seen anything like it. And if you can have a problem like that you just want to divert all mental resources to, that is the ideal thing you want for your hobby project. Because now you can attach any new technology to it, any kind of unfamiliar stack, and it doesn't matter what it is, you're going to want to churn through that because you just really want to tackle this problem now. So we figured out how to find new things. So briefly we're going to talk about how we can find some fun things. And this is going to look very similar to the new things list because it's almost identical. First off, you're going to keep a list. Again, It's pretty straightforward. You need to have your list of things you want to work on because it helps maintain that momentum. It helps keep you going when you're ready to start on the new project. You can immediately just look at your list and see, ooh, that sounds really good. I want to try that with this technology, and we're going to see what we can learn while working on this, because I've really been thinking about that problem, and I might have a way I can solve it. Language doesn't matter. Framework doesn't matter. I just want to solve this problem. Now, on the new things list, we're going to get to a certain point where we feel like we know what we're doing, and then we're kind of done with that. You know, we learned our new thing, we can move on to the next new thing. On the fun things, don't scratch it off the list. Keep it on your list because you don't really exhaust very easily the fun in a problem like something that should be on this list. If you've got some kind of topic that really interests you, come back to it with different projects, with different new technologies. Try some different approaches. Keep coming back to it. You can learn the new thing and be done, but the fun things are reusable. So a list is still very important for that. Also, again, keep an eye out. If you can just be aware of all the different places that you can find interesting problems, then that's another free resource on how you can get some more motivation. I think development blogs are a fantastic resource for just finding new, interesting problems. If you've got any programmer blogs that you like to follow, I think some of the projects that they tackle can just be really interesting and really get me excited about something. So, dev blogs, whether it be just guys programming a tool for something or programming a game, whatever it is, just kind of check in every once in a while to see what they're working on. Same with checking on other developers. See what they're working on with their hobby projects, because you're going to find some really interesting things that maybe you didn't think about, and you may want to try it too. If you can find something that somebody else is excited about, that motivation can be contagious. Maybe you'll join forces and create one big super project. Maybe you're just going to solve it in two different ways. Either way, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that we are continuing to program, continuing to practice our skills. Thirdly, we want to look at our hobbies. This is kind of the whole title of the talk. Hobbies are your resource for fun things that should be the easiest to tap into because you're already doing them. When you get off of work, you clock out, you get home, what do? You know, watch football, play video games, practice piano, whatever it is. You've got something that you're always looking forward to when you're at work, looking forward to getting home and doing something, woodworking or fishing, anything. Think about what those hobbies are. What are the things that you really enjoy doing? Because those are the things you should be looking at when deciding what to center your side projects around. So we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about this point, about hobby projects. So you could actually define a hobby project in a few different ways. I'm gonna set them in 3 tiers of definitions of hobby projects. So the first one is a project that's just about your hobby, something that kind of has a tangent. You're kind of talking about your hobby, but not really doing anything specific for it. So let's say, for instance, that you're a big football fan and you need to learn SQL really fast. It is a very contrived scenario, but just roll with me on this. So I think one possible project here that fits into this definition is, hey, could you come up with a data structure to store Super Bowl results? You think to yourself, okay, that's pretty simple. I mean, you just need a few columns and upload the data. And then wait, but maybe I could normalize the data for the teams, put that in a separate database, or a separate table, and then, oh wait, but some teams have changed names, so how do we store that? And you can just keep kind of going from there. Because you're kind of already interested about the topic, it lets you think about kind of the problem at hand with some pre-collected experience. So there's just a project about the hobby. It doesn't really help you with football. You're not playing football in any way, but you are still doing something about football. Similarly, maybe you like music theory. You like breaking songs down into chords. I found one really interesting puzzle is, can you come up with a class structure to represent different classifications of chords? You know, your major, your minor, diminished, all the others. If you can manage that, I think you'll find that you may not even know as much about music theory as you thought you did, because I did not. I tried to tackle this problem thinking to myself, oh yeah, you know, you got your A, B, C, these are just letters, I know all of those, A flat, I guess. And then, okay, now there's different, there's major, minor, the different, what variable what class do I call that? Actually, what is that called? And then I start researching and I realize, oh gosh, okay, so this is called the note class, and this is the I don't even remember the names of it, of the chord. And then you start realizing that there's a lot more to this than you thought, and you actually have to start learning more about the hobby itself. Because sometimes these hobby projects not only make you better at the new thing you're trying to learn, but they're also going to help you get a little bit better with your hobby as well. And when you start seeing that, it becomes sort of it's got an addictive nature. You're going to want to keep doing it because, oh gosh, well yeah, I mean, look at how much I'm learning about this. Yes, I'm also learning about this as a side effect, but look at how much better I'm getting at this other thing. So once you kind of get into that point, I think that's getting into kind of like a second tier hobby project, where now it's not just about your hobby, you're actually doing a project that's helping you with your hobby. You know, I'm learning more about music theory as I'm also learning how to do TypeScript and learning better class structure. Practicing that, I'm getting better at knowing the terms in music theory, knowing about chords and how they fit together. So maybe you are into 3D printing. I don't know how the file structure looks on those 3D printer files, but I bet you could find documentation for it, and I bet you could find some way to create a tool that lets you procedurally generate 3D models and feed those into your 3D printer. And now suddenly you've got more practice at getting the right fill rates and, forgive me, I don't know a lot about 3D printing either, but you start to get better at your hobby because you're practicing this other technology. So this becomes a synergistic kind of hobby project, that you're getting two boosts in experience from one thing. So maybe you play tennis. How about a simple app that helps you track your performance, track your games, see how you're doing, and maybe then you can go and turn it into something that automatically graphs out how you're doing and you can see your performance. And then you can port that over to a screen so that every day when you wake up you can see how good you are at tennis. And you get excited about it, and you get this sort of fever that you just have to keep working on this project because it's exciting. And you want to keep learning. That's what you really want to aim for. And then I think the third tier is when the project becomes your hobby. That you've gotten to this point where you keep wanting to work on it more and more, and it becomes less about your original hobby, and the project itself becomes a hobby. I've had certain projects that I've started working on to learn something, and they just kept going, and I kept getting interested in new problems I was encountering, until I had been working on the project for over a year and realizing that the project was what I was looking forward to now. I was looking forward to working on the project, not because it had some tangential relationship to a hobby that I had, but the project itself became a new hobby. So, hobby projects are the best resource, in my opinion, for getting new experience on something you're unfamiliar with, because you're going to want to do them. Again, practice makes you better at things. So if you want to practice, you're just going to get better at things for free. And you can't really pass up on that kind of deal. Okay, so finally, we got to go fast on our side projects. You've got something new that you want to work on. You've got something fun that you want to tie it to so that you keep working on it. This is more of opinion, I think, that may be kind of hit or miss on some of the projects that you're interested in. But I would suggest at least considering that you go fast in your projects. So why would we want to go really fast? So I think one thing that really helps with a project to keep that momentum going is that you're going to have more frequent milestones. For these short projects, if you can finish it in under a week, then you don't have time to get kind of bogged down. You don't have time to get exhausted with this project and want to be done with it. If you can be done with the project in a week, you can kind of just push yourself to the end and get it done, get it out the door. So if you do a fast project, you're going to get done more often. You're going to feel that satisfaction of having actually completed something, and you're going to be able to move on to the next idea. When one idea starts to get stale, you can start working on something different if you keep those projects small enough from the get-go. Less bloat, more value. If there is less in your project overall, you're going to have more time you can spend on the fun stuff, more time on the new stuff, and less time on the junk that you didn't really want to be bothered with because you're already very familiar with it. I'm talking about kind of, you don't have to build out a UI for your project. You could just put the parameters in the code because you just want to, this is just an iterative first pass. Just get going and make something. Don't get bogged down into, well, proper programming style would dictate that I make these in a config file and make it so that I can edit these from a control screen. Don't worry about that. This is a hobby project. You don't have to make it great for other users. You're doing this just for you for now. This is a first pass, quick and dirty, make something, and then throw it away. Easier iteration. Throw it away, and then start it again if you want to. Once you've gotten to the point where you feel like, yes, you reached your goal, but gosh, I think I could have redesigned this a little bit better. If you have a small project, you can start over and do it again and faster. If you've got a big project, okay, we need to think about refactoring. How am I going to, this is called by about 50 different methods, and well, ooh, that's going to break this other thing. If it's a small project, you don't have to worry about all that. You can just pick the whole thing up, throw it away, and start fresh. But this time you've got this extra experience, and you know exactly where the pitfalls are, where the problems are, where the design flaws were, and how you can improve it. You can't do that as easily on big projects. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's a lot harder on projects that kind of sprawl out and get everywhere. If you can keep those projects concise and small, you'll find that a lot of times it's quicker to just rebuild the whole thing than to try and untangle and refactor problems. And then you get practice with kind of the bonus of, okay, now I know a little bit better about how to architect this kind of solution in the future. Okay, so let's talk about how to go fast. We've already touched a little bit on some of these. Don't overcommit. I really think that before you even get going, you should have in your head an idea of what done is. Make it a very achievable, small goal. Make it something that you know, yeah, I can get that done in a reasonable amount of time, or at least get pretty close. Because when you overcommit to these projects, when you have all these ideas in your head about what you want this project to do, you're just going to feel like, oh, well, I can't make it to that anymore, so I may as well just give up on it. No, if you can have a short project, a small goal, then it's going to be much easier to keep that momentum going. Don't get detailed either. Less complexity and just more practice. Think less Norman Rockwell style paintings and think more like the Jason Pollock, the like splatter of paint. You know, both valuable art, different styles, but focus more on just quick ideas rather than very careful detail. Because I think getting that practice in quick and more often can give you more value than taking the time for a side project to do something very detailed. Now, I'm not saying don't ever do detailed projects. This is a particular type of hobby project that I think is very valuable. I think that the detailed stuff is very good, but you have to approach it in a very different way. For these small projects, don't get bogged down in the details. And again, restart often, because you're not losing that much work if you do need to restart, but also you're getting more experience with building that project out. So real quick, I want to show you some examples of what it looks like to not get over detailed. For instance, let's say that one of the things you like to do is build small little video games. And let's say, for instance, that making any kind of art takes a really long time. I would strongly advise you to not make art. Because as it turns out, with video games, you can just swap things out later. So, as you'll notice, this box is a man walking along a grassy path. You may not see the detail in the man's face, but I want to assure you that is a guy walking down a road. To the untrained eye, it looks like a box. But what you don't see is that I saved about 5 hours trying to actually draw something because I decided, you know what? I'm not interested in making something that looks good. Let's just make this guy a box. Again, not a great angle, but that is a dungeon crawler right there, and a rat. You can't tell because of the resolution. It may look like a completely featureless, not even bordered gray square, but that is what it is. And this one kind of gets cut off at the bottom of the screen. That's a cat in a spacesuit right there. My point is that you do not have to deal with all of the extra overhead that you normally get in full-featured projects if you commit to just going fast with it. Just fly fast and get something done, because if you spend 8 hours trying to actually draw a cat in a spacesuit, you're going to spend 8 less hours working on how to figure out polar coordinates. And if you can focus more on the skills you want to learn and less on the stuff you don't, then I think that's going to give you more value in becoming a better developer. So, where to go fast? So I've got some suggestions of some places that give you some great opportunities to just have some quick problems thrown at you that you can kind of try and solve. So first off, hackathons and code jams. Excellent source. They give you a little bit of inspiration and say, just go wild. So one I've been involved in over the past couple of years is the Ludum Dare Jam, ldjam.com. They do 24-hour or 3-day game jams, where they just give you a theme. I think one is going on this weekend, actually. I don't know what the theme is, but they just give you a theme and say, all right, go make a game, quick. And that kind of time box and giving you the inspiration right off the bat makes it really easy to just go ahead and say, okay, what about this? How about this? Yeah, let's go with this. And you just start going. And that's what you want, is you want to just make something happen. Also, programming puzzles. There's a couple different sites that I like for just some small little puzzles that you can do in whatever language you want. Just solve the problem. Project Euler is a great source. These are a little bit more math heavy. But they're problems that you could brute force the solution for, but you're going to have to wait about 3 days for the processor to actually give you an answer. But if you can kind of think a little bit more laterally about the problem and get clever with your solution, you can actually get something in a matter of minutes, which is more preferred. And also CodeWars.com, something actually I learned about, I think, last year at CodeStock. Just programming puzzles, and you can actually also, I think, join up with other programmers and have a little team. And it kind of keeps track of how well you're doing and gives you progressively harder problems, which is perfect. That's what you want. I think CodeWars is an excellent resource, especially for newer developers, because it lets you kind of start with simpler problems. Project Euler, again, better for mathematicians, I think, or people that have more of an interest in math. LDJam, great if you like building games, because they're just going to give you the ideas right off the So just in closing, I just want to reiterate that the absolute best thing you can do to make yourself a better programmer is to program. Again, this is super obvious to everyone, but I think just actually doing it is the tricky part. And so that's why I say, if you can find something that you're really interested in and make that your project, you're going to have no problem finding the motivation to actually get out there and get something done. So, again, I'm Eric Dobbs. This is my email address and my website where I put my dinky little web games on there that I think are actually okay, at least. I'll be hanging out a little bit afterwards if you've got any questions. For now, it is getting close to lunch. I think it starts in about 10 minutes. So if anybody wants to go ahead and get some lunch, go ahead and get out there. If you want to hang out and talk, feel free to come down and chat with me for a bit. Thanks, everybody.